EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, a Friday edition, Football Friday edition of Birds 365 OTAs yesterday. Johnny Mack was down at practice. Good morning to everybody in the chat. Good morning to you, John McMullen. How you doing, Johnny Mack?
Doing well, yeah. Isaiah Rodgers season.
Yeah, man. A lot of people talking about Isaiah Rodgers, John. Let's get right into it. What's your first takeaways from Isaiah and from the rest of the OTA? You were
MVP of the OTAs, which are officially over. At least from a public perspective, they're going to have another OTA. But for the ones we saw, and that's only 2, and it's only the spring, and it's May, and all those contextual things, and there's no pads, and there's no press coverage, and there's no DeVonta Smith, but he has been spectacular, living up to the hype of people who never saw him play before. He's been there's nothing bad you can say about Isaiah Rodgers.
That's great, though. I mean, he looks like, and I know you guys talked to him afterward too. Did he have some good things to say in the press conference? I didn't get a chance to catch him. I did hear some of the other guys who spoke, Jordan and Nolan Smith and stuff, but sounded like Isaiah Rodgers was energetic and he had some good things to say.
Yeah, I was most impressed by the fact that he completely takes accountability for what happened with his suspension, and he's not one of those guys who complains about, oh, the rules and this and it's too harsh and that. He just put his head down, kept working. Obviously, kind of explained. One of the things that's so impressive is he hasn't been on a football field in over 500 days, and he looks like the best guy out there. And you would think the rust, you saw it with Deshaun Watson when he had his issues and came back, hasn't been the same player. And it's very early, as I said, in the process. I gave you all those contextual things. I hope you pay attention to that. When he gets the pads on, is he going to be physical? Really, he's dealing with Paris Campbell and Joseph Nada right now. When it becomes more AJ, more DeVonta, obviously it's going to get a little bit more difficult, to say the least. But most impressive is he kept himself ready, and he tried to mimic a normal game week throughout the offseason, what he would do to prepare, keep his body ready. So all good. Can't say anything bad about Isaiah Rodgers. All you can judge is what's out there. And he, had a pick 6, baited Jalen Hurts in a backed up period. And it was a throw to A.J. Brown, slant to A.J. Brown, just picked it up and took it for a pick 6. So to see that kind of savviness and that Slade level stuff, baiting quarterbacks to throw something and jump in the route. So pretty impressive.
How good, John? Like, are we talking like a guy that could potentially be a starting outside corner on this team? I know we talked about it maybe at slot, but if he's looking that good, is Slay almost, I don't want to say in the way, because Slay is a fantastic player, but what are they going to do? Are they going to keep Quinion on the bench if Isaiah Rodgers is playing that well?
Yeah, I'm not going to go that far yet.
Okay.
I always tell the story. I don't know if you heard it when you were the producer, but I always tell the story of Kyrie's Abear. Nobody remembers for good reason, because he never turned into anything. But early in my career, he is the best spring player I've ever seen. I mean, he made a play at practice every day, and I'm talking splash play. And he looked like Ronnie Lott. And, as training camp got there and the pads came on, and training camp was longer in those days and much more time to get exposed. All of a sudden, You know, he was running with he was so good in the spring. He was an undrafted free agent. He was so good in the spring. He started training camp as on the first team, and it slowly started falling apart. Second team, third team. He didn't even make the team. Eventually went to the CFL. Um, and I'm not saying that's Isaiah because he's already
Yeah, you're
been
just
in the
adding the
NFL.
context of it is
Yeah,
spring football, yeah.
yeah, he's already been in the NFL. He's clearly an NFL player. But you know, you drafted Quinyon Mitchell number 22 overall for a reason. Um, you know, he was drafted. He was the first cornerback drafted in this draft for a reason. He's got tremendous talent, um, tremendous upside. Now, where I think Isaiah Rodgers has kind of positioned himself, and we'll see minicamp next week. We'll get to see each practice. Um, I think, you know, something's going to happen with James Bradbury, whether it's sooner or later. And I don't think James is going to be here. I've been pretty above board on that. And I think he's the guy that if now that Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, add Cooper in there as well. If they're not ready to play right away, which, you know, if you listen to Nolan Smith's press conference yesterday, you know, there's a learning curve to the NFL. Bottom line, no matter how good you are, there's a learning curve to the NFL. Um, and if they're not ready to play right away, Isaiah Rodgers is probably the guy now that would start opposite Darius Slay. I would say that. But does that mean Quinyon Mitchell won't be out there? By no means does it mean that.
Yeah, but I tell you what, all of a sudden the cornerback room, and I know it is spring football. I don't want to overreact to Isaiah Rodgers, but it's not just you saying it. It's any reporter that was down there is calling out how good he looked. All of a sudden, Slay, Rodgers, Ringo, Mitchell, DeJean, Ricks, Maddox. All of a sudden, I mean, that's a pretty good cornerback room. And if Slay can play competent, Rodgers steps up, and Mitchell is what we think he could be. I mean, that could turn to a strength quickly. We had them as a weakness yesterday. I don't know if that's going to pan out.
Well, that was I kind of
That was
like
the
it might
beginning
be
of the year, right? We
it
switched
might be
strength.
weakness
Yeah,
early, strength because you have Quinyon and Cooper, and they're both
right.
going to be good
He does
players.
that.
It's just a matter of that ramp up period of that learning curve, how quick or how long, and everybody's a little bit different. Um, and this is a very difficult defense to learn, as I mentioned, so that factors into it as well. But yeah, they have potential. They have the potential to be very deep at corner. They have a bunch of guys who have what Howie would call the traits in their bodies to be good corners.
You're right.
Does that mean they're all going to hit? I said yesterday, no, doesn't mean they're all going to hit, but there's a pretty good chance they have so many that one or two are going to hit. And that's sort of the goal. And you mentioned Ringo. Ringo was back. Slay was not there. CJ was not there. So you had Slay, CJ, and Bradbury were not there. Obviously, James was not there. Um, so it was Isaiah Rodgers and Kaylee Ringo as the starters on the outside. Tyler Hall was the starter in the slot. And that's because Avonte Maddox moved back to play safety
Safety.
next to Reed Blankenship. So um, it's another sort of
They're going to make Cooper
indication.
DeJean earn it, I guess, in the
Yeah,
slot. Yeah,
well, yeah, same with Quinyon. Quinyon's on the second team because they're going to make him earn it. But it is an indication that Avante's going to be here, and they value that versatility, and his ability to be backup safety, um, if healthy, uh, gives them the opportunity to probably keep one more of those young corners that they may have had to cut,
right.
um, if they needed to get a forced safety.
Yeah, and the more I hear about the cornerback room, and the more it seems like they're going to go that route. Let's just stay on cornerback real quick. Corey in the chat's asking about Ringo, and I wanted to ask you about him, so I'll go right there. He was not present at the first OTA that was open to the media. He was present yesterday, as you mentioned. He was playing in Slay's position because Slay was not out there. How did Keely Ringo look? Does he look like a guy that's going to take another step forward this year? And what did you see from him out there?
Yeah, he looked good as well. He had a chance. He should have. They had 4
Yeah.
interceptions, and they should have
Yeah,
had
good day
5.
for the defense, huh?
Yeah, the defense is, well, we'll talk about the offense because they are struggling, but they had 4 interceptions. Should have had 5, and Kaylee dropped one. Jalen threw a deep ball. I think it was to Paris Campbell. I'd have to check my notes, but um, and he was all over it, and he should have picked it off, but he dropped it. So it should have been 5. And he's playing well. Yeah, I mean, 4 interceptions, and all 3 quarterbacks got picked. All 3 of them.
Yeah.
Um, so the defense is playing very well early. Now you hear it all the time, and it's true. Defense is always ahead of offense early in the NFL because the offense needs a little bit more chemistry, needs a little bit more time. I wouldn't exactly panic, but it's been a struggle for this group which is learning a new offense and trying to install a new offense with Kellen Moore. They have not looked good, to be fair. But it's spring. It's May 30th. So I wouldn't it's May 31st, but I wouldn't get too overworked because they have so much talent. And again, Devontae wasn't out there again. Lane hasn't been out there. And they did one team. They actually did 111. They rarely do 11 on 11s. They did an 11 on 11 red zone period. Jalen Hurts had an opportunity to throw a touchdown pass to Dallas Goedert. Was a little bit outside, a little bit high. Dallas couldn't get it in. So Jalen hasn't looked good, to be honest. Kenny took a big step back from he had a good first practice. He badly underthrew John Ross. They tried a deep shot to John Ross,
Yeah, I
and
saw
that
a
was
couple underthrows to John. Is that because he's so dang fast? Or
yeah. Well, he is,
yeah.
but that's not why that was a Mekhi Gardner interception that was underthrown because it was so badly underthrown. I mean, it wasn't about John's speed. John's very fast, obviously, but it wasn't like he couldn't. It was just a bad throw. Um, and then Tanner McKee was. I don't know if Doug Nussmeier's trying to break down his mechanics, but he looked like a different guy. He looked like a mechanical mess. So he got picked by Sean Stevens to end the practice. Not a good day for the offense. I will say that.
Yeah, I did see the video you posted out too of Jalen Hurts with Doug Nussmeier. So we'll get into that. We're going to start the show today. I want to welcome everybody in. Thank you all for being here. Twiz and Prince, Corey, Ricky, Dank. We appreciate Dill Lock. We appreciate all you guys. Make sure you drop a like on Birds 365 as it's the best thing you can do to help us grow. So we appreciate you all being here this morning. Johnny Mac and I are going to do a little open recap, what stood out to John that we're doing right now. And then a little bit later on in hour number 1, we're going to do kind of a deep dive into anybody that stood out, the position groups, Zach Bond. A lot of people are talking about Zach Bond. So even the
Devin
wide
White, Devin White, by the way, Nakobe Dean, surprised to me, was back. So that might calm the injury people down. But he was back on the second team and it was rotating. So he's clearly, they're dipping the toes in the pool. But, I'm starting to think Devin White's going to be the middle linebacker. And Nakobe Dean's going to be a backup.
Yeah, I mean, especially if Zach Bond is playing as well as it sounds like he's playing.
Yeah. Vic has, in the limited opportunities we've had to talk to him, he has spoken very highly of both Devin White and Zach Bond, and kind of put Nakobe off to the side, mentioning he's just getting back. And, maybe it's just that. Maybe they're taking him slowly.
Right.
But, Devin White's just bigger. And, he's more equipped physically to handle middle linebacker in the NFL. We know some of the issues he had in Tampa. We've talked about them a lot. But Vic, seems to think he's a good player. and he had a bad year, and he thinks he'll bounce back. And it was notable with Zach Bond when he started talking about linebackers. First name out of his mouth was Zach Bond, so that was notable too. May have been
How's Zach
C's
Bond look
game.
to you? Good, right?
Well, he had an interception, but that was more, and that's why I brought up Devin White. That was more Devin White and Isaiah Rodgers. That was a throw over the middle, and those guys just had it locked down, inside throw over the middle, and it was tipped, and Zach corralled it for an interception. So it's one of those things where people are going to notice the interception, but it was really about Devin White and Isaiah Rodgers. And Zach did a nice job hauling it in. He kind of bobbled it and then corralled it. But I was more impressed with Devin and Isaiah on that particular play.
Yeah, because they created the deflection. So good
Yeah.
stuff from them. Good stuff from Zach Bond. Thanks, James Carver, for being here this morning for the super chat. We appreciate it. Thank you, Johnny Mack and Zander, for the second OTA press-wise wrap-up and videos. It was the first thing I watched last night after my power came back on. Love Birds 365 since the draft. James, thank you, man. We appreciate you being here. As always, you are a great contributor to the show. All your great comments, all your great contributions. So we appreciate you and everybody else in the chat. As always, Johnny Mack, what else stood out to you yesterday? I know the defense was well ahead. Sounds like Jalen Hurts is still finding his rhythm this offseason, but anything else that stuck out to you?
Well, that's one of them, how they are struggling offensively, trying to get this system down. And maybe it shouldn't be a surprise. It probably shouldn't be a surprise, but it hasn't looked good at all from that standpoint. And I'm not going to sound the alarm bells from the perspective of this team has too much talent to not be successful when everybody is there. But we can only talk about what we saw, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was bad from an offensive perspective yesterday. And, some of the same things, a little bit forcing the ball to AJ.
Yeah, I read that somewhere else too. Shoot, I wish I could give him credit where I read that. But I did read AJ. I mean, now granted, Devontae Smith's not out there, but I did read that could partly be that interception that Isaiah Rodgers turned back. He telegraphed.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, it was. And, whether you want to say telegraphed or Isaiah baited him, but, and look, it's natural when you have a player like AJ Brown to sort of default to him. But, when it's not there, that's when we talk about, and that's a fine line, if AJ's cooking, but if they're trying to take him away and it's not there, that's where the other people have to step up, and you have to get the other people involved, not necessarily game planning to get him the football, but through the natural progression of the routes.
And that's where I think the predictability thing can come into play. Like if they're taking away AJ and you're forcing the ball to him over and over again, that's where I think there is merit to that. But overall, I do agree with you.
Yeah. And again, it's May. I hope everybody understands that in the context.
It's May. We have to do a show today, guys. We're going to talk about it, So.
Yeah. And once this offensive line gets on the field, again, there was one 11-on-11 session, brief session in the red zone, but there's no pads. There's no physicality from Lane Johnson. There's no Landon Dickerson pushing people around. There's no Jordan Mailata dominating pass rushers. Then it becomes a different game when that offensive line is out there. So this is just essentially a passing camp, as I mentioned. And the passing game hasn't looked good. It just hasn't.
John, I want to ask you about tight end. Albert O making some plays. EJ Jenkins making some plays. I mean, Dallas Goedert, I think, and CJ Uzama are your locks at 1 and 2, but is Grant Calcaterra going to be shown the door?
Yeah, I think he's On the bubble, no question. I think they're all on the bubble. I think Alberto's on the bubble. I think Grant's on the bubble, and EJ Jenkins is playing himself into at least getting some looks to be a potential tight end 3. I think he's been the best in the passing camp. But again, the pads aren't on. Blocking's a big part of playing
Right.
tight end.
Yeah.
I don't know if EJ Jenkins can block us. So I haven't seen him
Yeah.
with pads on. So that factors into it. Um, but yeah, those 3 guys are probably going to be pushing to be the third tight end behind Dallas Goedert and CJ Uzama. And CJ was back and it was good to see him. He's a big dude and he knows how to play. I don't know how much is left in the tank, but he knows how to play NFL football, and that's a big deal. Sort of what Nolan Smith talked about a little bit as well. Um, and I think, the top 2 will be an upgrade because I think CJ still got enough where he's going to be better than Jack Stoll in that type of role. But Jenkins has been impressive. He had a back shoulder from Kenny Pickett. Very natural receiver. He's having a very good spring. So, I mean, I'm sure he's opened some eyes. Albert was a little bit better. He had a nice catch as well. And Oren Burks, I believe, was in coverage. It's clear that the Howie Roseman likes Alberto. He traded for him. We all thought he wouldn't be re-signed because he didn't contribute last year, and the Eagles signed him early in the process. So Howie sort of wants it to succeed. I would think Albert has the default sort of it's his job to lose, but we'll see how it shakes out. I think it'll be a legitimate competition.
Yeah, so some pretty good takeaways from Johnny Mac. I think it's a good thing to hear that the defense is playing as well as they are because I think they're the bigger question going into the season, and everybody needs them to take a step forward. The Eagles need them certainly to take a step forward if they want a chance to compete for a Super Bowl. Anything you learned yesterday and we'll talk about this in our extended breakdown and our deep dive into each thing, but any just quick takeaways from the press conferences yesterday? Sounded like Jordan Davis sounded pretty good. Nolan Smith was all fired up, a little bit Brandon Graham-esque. Any takeaways from the press conferences yesterday?
Yeah, Nolan is, he's the heir apparent to be the energy guy, but you got to perform. You can't be Brandon Graham without the performance to back it up. And that's, he's got the rest of it. The energy guy, as you mentioned.
Right.
But you got to perform. And this is a big season. And everybody who saw Nolan, he's gotten bigger. He's 245, he said. So that's part of it, getting a little bit talked about that basically all last season. He's got to get bigger and stronger. And that's what happened. That generally is what happens when, people joke about major college football and, they're essentially majoring in football in college, which is true, but there is some, other responsibilities. And, when you get to the NFL, it's your job. And the same thing with Jordan Davis. Jordan Davis, a lot of talk about conditioning and things of that nature. He's 350, hasn't lost much weight, but he looks, as everyone saw at the autism bike ride, he looks leaner, he looks slimmer, and it's better weights. So he's been doing his job, and he kind of confirmed that Vic is counting on Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, which I mentioned. That's the foundation of this defense. That's what this defense is going to be built on. Those 2 players in the middle of this defense. So they got to perform. And Jordan said he wants us to play a lot, essentially. And, Vic wants them to be the dudes, as he kind of mentioned. And we'll see. A lot of it has to do with the conditioning aspect. Can they play a Fletcher Cox level of snaps I would say that would be more Jalen because he's the pass rusher, but Jordan as well is going to be, he's the guy in those 5-man fronts, but he's going to play a lot in 4-man fronts. So that means he's got to do a little bit better on the pass rush as well and be a little bit more consistent from that standpoint.
I know you're not seeing much from the defensive line because it is a passing camp mostly right now in helmets and shorts. But how does Jordan Davis look out there? I saw the video of him jogging around yesterday. Anything you can see from him or not much?
No, I mean, this is not the time to
it's not the time to
ingest offensive and defensive linemen, to be honest. I just know that they're extremely gifted. And I put them together, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, college teammates, pro teammates. And Vic said it about Jalen specifically. Look, doesn't matter how we use him, he's going to be good. He's just good. And the same with Jordan. He's just good. It's a matter of how good is he going to be. But they clearly are building this defense on the foundation of those two particular players.
We're going to get to our first commercial break. We'll come back and into a deeper dive into the OTA and talk about some specific players. It's the Isaiah Rodgers show right now at OTAs for Eagles camp. Only
MVP of OTAs.
Johnny Mack declared it. It's not just hearsay and Twitter. Johnny Mack is telling you right here he is Johnny Mack's OTA MVP. Now, that might not be worth much, but it's worth a lot.
That's the greatest award. I said, I'm joking.
It's the greatest award you can get on May 31st of the offseason.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
Isaiah Rodgers looks like he could be a player for the Eagles, which is good stuff. So we'll get to our first commercial break. I want to thank everybody for being in here this morning. Anybody that didn't join in at the top of the show, we'll recap a little bit what we hit on. Mostly Isaiah Rodgers, talking about him and how good he's looked and the crowded cornerback room. So we'll get to that. We'll talk press conferences. We'll talk Zach Bond. We'll talk defense, Vic Fangio, all that and more coming up next on Birds 365. Stay tuned, everybody.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Val Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Football Friday edition of Birds 365. Good stuff all around. A good initial reaction from Johnny Mack. Key takeaways, I could call it, from Johnny Mack down at day two of open OTAs to the media. Not day two overall. Day 5, I believe, was yesterday, and then they'll have day 6 today. John, let's get a report in, not so much reaction and observations. Who was in attendance yesterday, or I guess a better question would be who was not in attendance, and anybody that was an eye-opener to you? Last week we had Keely Ringo. I know some of the older guys are going to miss. You mentioned James Bradbury and Slay were gone, but just who didn't make it to yesterday, and then an update on the injuries as well.
It was all veterans who were not there, so no, nothing eye-opening. Lane Johnson, I mentioned, Slay, Bradbury, CJ, so most of the secondary. Josh Sweat hasn't been there for either of the open practices. So when they did have that 11-man period, it was Bryce Hupp on the right side, which would typically be Josh, and Brandon Graham on the left side, which would typically, I assume, be Huff. And inside it was Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Milton Williams. So no surprises there. So that was it from the guys who were missing, all the veteran guys. So no concerns there. Two notable injuries. I mentioned Nakobe returned, which was a little bit of a surprise. I thought they'd be cautious. They held him out of team drills last week, but he was back working a little bit. He was rotating on the second team with Ben Van Sumeren, Nextor, and Burks. So, just dipping the toes in the pool. But I think it's notable that they kept Devin White and Zach Bond as the first team. And I think that was pretty notable. And Anaya Smith, who's working his way back from a stress fracture they found at the scouting combine, looks ready. I think he wants to be out there. He's got his helmet. He's stretching, and all of a sudden he doesn't do anything in individuals or teamwork. They did let him return a punt. The punt returners were Britton Covey, Cooper DeJean, Isaiah Rogers, and then Anaya Smith. They let him return a punt, and he muffed it, unfortunately, for Anais. And he did some push-ups, so he punished himself. I think he was just so excited to be out there. But not a great first impression. But he hasn't been working in team drills yet, so not quite ready. And then Jacob Harrison, to a lesser extent, he was probably the best of the second-tier wide receivers in the first OTA practice. He's a big guy, 6'5", runs sub 4.4, has some NFL experience, mostly as a special teams player. But he was out. He was watching practice, so can't be too serious, but he was out. The Eagles don't have to report injuries, so they're not going to tell us what the injury is. Knowing him, and he's a fast guy, it's probably soft tissue.
Yeah. Hamstring or something.
Yeah. And then Eli Ricks, who got hurt early last week and wasn't in the teamwork, was back, and he was working with the second team, but then he left again. So he's still dealing with something, I think. But he was back and he was practicing some. So those are sort of the injury notes that I have.
Yeah, so Sidney Brown's still out, and Kobe Dean's starting to get some reps. He
Yes,
did
I
work.
mean Sydney's out. Sydney's
Yeah,
not
he's not
doing
practicing
anything.
told. Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
he's
not
he's
told.
not doing. He's got a torn ACL, so that's a 9-month injury. He's going to be out for most of training camp too, but he should be ready to go. His goal is week 1, but at the bare minimum, very early in the season. But he's not going to have much of an off season. That thing needs time to heal, even though he looks like he could play. Oh, I should mention Zach McPherson.
Wow, that's a name we haven't heard in a little bit.
Yeah. Zach's such a good guy. It's very difficult. The numbers, we constantly talk about the numbers. He's back at practice, but he's not getting reps, which is obviously not a good sign. Coming off an Achilles, and he was on the sidelines. He was engaged. He had his helmet on. He probably worked in the developmental period after practice. We get kind of shuttled off quickly, but he's not getting reps with the first group of corner, which is not a good sign. But he is back from the torn Achilles, at least.
Yeah, so we'll see if he makes the team. Johnny Mac, we're going to do a little bit of offense and a little bit of defense. But before we do that, I do want to go to the rookies. Let's talk about the rookies. Quinyon Mitchell, everybody's waiting to see how he is. How did he look? Cooper DeJean was lined up in the slot on the second team again. Anais Smith, at least he got to go out there and touch the ball, what maybe wasn't a great touch after a drop. But how did the rookies look? And then a Jeremiah Trotter Jr. update at that linebacker. So anything you saw that stood out to you from the rookies?
Yeah, I thought Quinyon really didn't no splash things, no noticeable, but nothing bad either. So that's always good when you have
That's a good thing,
cornerback,
right? Yeah.
So not a lot of balls went his way, but yeah, still on the second team. As Ringo was back, and they went with Ringo and Rogers to start, and then Cooper, as you mentioned, he had reps inside and outside again, which is a good sign because it's a clear indication that Vic believes he can handle a bunch of stuff. And, at one point, he was nickel one play and he was outside on the next play, which is, again, a good indication from my perspective. He had a one slot play, Britton Covey, who's, by the way, done a really good job in his reps as a slot receiver, tends to get very good separation, but Cooper locked him down at one point and got a PBU on a quick out route option route where Britton went outside. DeJean got his hands on the football. So Cooper's doing well, and I would say both are doing well.
No reps at safety though for Cooper, right? Because a lot of people are still floating that out there that they think he could be a safety. Nothing at safety.
No, nothing at safety. Avonte Maddox was the starter at safety with Reed Blankenship, and the backups were Tristan McCullum and Mekhi Gardner. And then he went down to Andre Sam and who am I missing? I'll try to but no, he's not taken one rep at safety to this point that we've seen. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen somewhere down the road when it becomes more 11 on 11. I think you're going to see him, as I said, in the big nickel at times. So whatever you want to call that, as a third safety, an extra linebacker, right. It's sort of depends on labeling. It doesn't matter really how you want to label it, but his versatility is there. But he's not played traditional safety. For people that think he's not going to be in the conversation to be a starting safety. If people think that, the Eagles scouted him as an outside cornerback, believe ultimately he's going to be an outside cornerback, but believe he has the versatility to play a bunch of different positions.
Yeah, so we'll see how it all shakes out with them. So good stuff from the rookies. Did you see anything from Trotter or no?
13 middle linebacker, so nothing, which is fine. As I mentioned, it went Devin White or Zach Bond. Second team was N'Kobe or Ben Van Sumeren and Oren Burks, and Jeremiah is on the third team with Brandon Smith. So they're starting them off slowly. Nothing wrong with that, and he'll probably get some second team reps. Not probably, definitely in training camp, maybe even by mini camp. Yeah. If anybody thinks he's going to be a day one starter, you're probably going to be disappointed.
John, let's move into the offense. I want to talk offense. Let's start with Jalen Hurts, but I'm excited to talk about the wide receiver 3 after hearing and reading some stuff, especially from Ed Kratz, your buddy at Sports Illustrated, wrote some good overreactions. So I will preface it with that. They are overreactions, but still good stuff from him nonetheless. But let's start with Jalen Hurts and the whole quarterback room. Kenny Pickett took a little bit of a step backwards yesterday compared to his red hot OTA number 1 in front of you guys. Is that correct? And then just what you saw from Jalen.
Yeah, the quarterbacks were not good, and it was it was a room, the entire room. They all contributed. They all had interceptions. Jalen had 2, should have had 3. I mentioned Ringo dropped 1.
Yeah, that was to Paris Campbell, by the way.
Yeah, and tremendous coverage by Ringo. No shot on the throw, and he just dropped the interception. So wasn't a great throw, not a great performance. Kenny was probably even worse. So for those who the underthrow, the one thing Kenny Pickett can really's got the back shoulder down well.
Yeah,
he is really good on back shoulder throws, but I don't know if you can run an entire offense around back shoulder throws. But he had 2 nice back shoulder throws that were pinpoint. The problem was the other stuff. And then Tanner McKee just had bad practice. That's the worst practice I've ever seen.
Yeah, I'm a little interested in what you said about him in the open about his mechanics. Like, is Doug Nussmeier messing with them that much? That
I don't know. I don't know. But
because that's not something you want to hear if a quarterback coach is working on your mechanics and you're a second-year pro.
He just looked. I've seen him enough now where he looked totally different throwing motion than what he typically has. So maybe he just had a bad day, and that's part of the thing. Mechanics are a big thing with young quarterbacks because
absolutely. Jalen Hurts had that. Jalen Hurts needed to work.
Carson Wentz had it as well. And the thing is, it's sort of like the baseball analogy. I'll go Jim Schwartz. If you see a pitcher, all of a sudden one day they just they're not as consistent with their motion, and everything breaks down, and hopefully that's not what's going on with Tanner McKee, but yeah.
Well, Tanner McKee is not the guy I'm worried about. Obviously, it's what's happening to him, but the reason I asked the question is because Doug Nussmeier is going to be coaching Jalen Hurts and Kenny Pickett too. So if what
I'm not ready to throw Kellen and Doug under the bus, but
no, I don't either.
It isn't. All you can do is talk about what you saw, and the offense was bad. I mean, 4 interceptions that should have been 5 in a passing
from the offense
in a passing camp. I think people don't understand. These things are geared towards the offense being successful.
Right.
Chip Kelly used to talk about the ball never hits the ground, and Chip, a bunch of coaches, when Sam Bradford, ball never hits the ground when Sam Bradford's here in 7-on-7s. Because he's so accurate and all that kind of stuff. But he was, but 7-on-7 isn't football. And Sam had tons of injury issues, obviously, but it is designed. I bring that up because it's easy for the offense. Well, it hasn't been easy. And that's not a good sign. You should be dominating 7-on-7s, and they're not. And there's no way you should be throwing 4 interceptions in a passing camp in a modern NFL. And there they were throwing them, and it should have been
By the way,
5.
they're throwing them to a lot of young guys. Now it's not like Darius Slay's out there picking on them. This is Ringo. It's Isaiah Rodgers, a guy who hasn't played football in over a year. That could be a little concerning. I don't want to overreact to it, but
I
based
kind
on
of
the way you're explaining it, it looks like the offense has been pretty putrid.
It has. It has been pretty putrid, but again, the offensive line isn't out there for the most part. That's the strength of this
Defensive
team.
line isn't out there either, though, and that's who I look at as the strength of the defense.
Well, that's true as well. And hey, it's a good sign. You look at it both ways: glass half full, glass half empty. The corners have looked a lot better than they have been, and that's a good thing.
Okay, well, let's do an exercise real quick. If you had a pick, I'm going to force you to pick one way or the other. Is it more that the offense is playing poorly or that the defense is exceeding expectation and playing very well and causing turnovers?
Offense. Yeah, I mean,
easy answer for John.
I mean, part of it. A lot of it is Devontae's not there. I mean, we've talked about it over the past week a lot. They fall off a cliff after AJ and Devontae at wide receiver. So you're throwing the ball to Joseph Nada and Paris Campbell, which is not a strength. But while I say that, you had a chance to throw a touchdown to Dallas Goedert, and it's off target. You had a chance to throw a long touchdown that would have excited people to John Ross on day one with John Ross being here, and they underthrew it by 8-10 yards. That's not the defense. That's John Ross was behind the defense. They just underthrew it. Mekhi Gardner intercepted it. From your question, it's more the offense is not sharp. And that's typically the way it goes in every NFL city. The defense is ahead of the offense early.
Yeah.
So that part of it's not that rare or unique. And then you are learning a new offense, and there seems to be a lot of uncertainty. That's another thing. When you're in 7-on-7s and the ball doesn't come out, and a ball doesn't come out way too much with the Eagles quarterbacks, which means they're overthinking things.
Which I mean, we had BLG on Wednesday. He talked about that a lot with Jalen Hurts processing and getting the ball.
And it's not just Jalen either. It's everybody.
Yeah, but I'm the guy most focused on.
Yeah.
So if he's holding on to the ball in 7-on-7s, I mean, that's not great.
No, but he's always held on to the ball. He's going to, as Brandon mentioned, he's going to hold on to the ball because that's part of his game. But on 7-on-7s, you want to see it come out because you also have to understand what the drills are and what they're trying to accomplish. And that's another thing from the impact of, sometimes you are going to throw passes in practices that maybe you wouldn't throw in a game because you're trying to test it.
It's like me at the par 3 course the other day. I was playing, doing a little punch and run. I'm like, I got to practice on it here because I'm not going to do it on the course.
Yeah, exactly. And then go back to the baseball stuff and Jim Schwartz. I mean, you see good pitchers get destroyed in spring training a lot because they're working on something new.
Right.
And they're trying to maybe add a curveball, maybe add a changeup to their mix, and they use it down there. And everybody's like, whoa, so-and-so got rocked. It doesn't matter. So that factors into it as well. I try to give as much context as possible, and I'm not concerned about the offense at all, but I'm also not going to lie to you and say, hey, they're doing well. They're
Yeah.
not doing well. They're struggling trying to learn a new offense, which
Yeah.
is not a bad thing.
Not looking good, but no reason to be overly concerned about it right now. John, any sign of the RPO out there? Daz brings up a good point. Holding onto the ball is a tough thing. You know, when Jalen was in that RPO and quick read offense, he was getting that ball out much quicker. Any sign of that out there?
No, it's a passing game. No, but no, the running game is not even involved.
Yeah, I didn't know
Not
if they
even
would at least
involved.
line it up, even if the defense knows the pass is coming, just to
Yeah.
practice the.
It's not. I mean, it's not even involved at this stage, which is part of it all as well. I mean,
Right.
you have no threat. The defense has no threat of a running game. They know a pass is coming, so that's another big part of it. It becomes a lot more difficult when you have that RPO game involved, and you have to worry about stopping the run, and you have to worry about Saquon Barkley. Yeah, and Saquon not involved at all. So, I don't.
Not much from Saquon yesterday, other than the fact that he looks pretty good in Eagle Green, and everybody's excited
Oh, he
about
looks
that.
good.
Yeah.
He's the get off the bus guy first. Yeah, he looks good.
It's not everything, but at least he does look good, I guess. I guess, right?
Well,
John,
he
let's talk-
always has. Nobody
Yeah.
would ever say Saquon doesn't look good.
Yeah, he's built and he's looks good in Eagle Green. And I saw the video you tossed me of Jalen throwing it to him from the backfield, so everybody gets excited at that stuff. Me as well. I'm guilty of it as well. Johnny Mac, let's talk wide receiver 3. Apparently, Paris Campbell's looking decent. John Ross looking decent. They seem to be, is the philosophy here, John Ross and Paris Campbell together make up the speed you lose with Quez Watkins?
Well, I had to chuckle.
Is that what we're going for, John?
I mean, John Ross is, he's a 4.22 guy. So I don't know what he runs now. Maybe he can't run a 4.22 today, but he did mention that he thinks he can run
Fast.
at that level more consistently than when he was younger. And he did get behind the defense at one time. He does look like he's still got juice from a speed perspective. And right now he's got an opportunity because they don't have anything awe-inspiring behind AJ and Devontae, to say the least. So it'll be interesting. I still think somewhere they're going to add another more proven receiver somewhere down the road, and maybe go in a different direction, but we'll see how that shakes out. With Paris, he's mentioned, he talked yesterday as well. He's got a long history with not only Nick Sirianni, but Kevin Patullo and Jason Michael and Aaron Moorhead, guys who were in Indianapolis when he was drafted there. So he's got familiarity from that standpoint. And he's a guy who looks like an NFL receiver, but it hasn't really manifested itself over 5 seasons. So it's hard for me to think that the switch is going to go on in year number 6. I do think he's not going to embarrass you out there. I think he's going to make catches when the ball comes his way. And he would be the heavy favorite to be the third receiver, I would say, still right now.
Yeah, it seems like Hurts likes him too, right? A lot of targets to him from Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, well, right now he's the wide receiver too. Now that's what you don't want to happen. If you can imagine, all of a sudden, and you kind of saw it with Quez. I mean, when Quez had to be the wide receiver too, it wasn't great, and it probably wouldn't be great if Paris Campbell had to be the wide receiver too.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say it definitely wouldn't be great if Paris Campbell had to be the wide receiver too. Let's move into, we talked tight ends already earlier today. I know EJ Jenkins made some good plays. Alberto still fighting for the roster spot. Solid practice yesterday by all reports. John, let's talk defense. We'll start back on Isaiah Rodgers because we have a lot of new listeners now compared to, when we started the show. It's the Isaiah Rodgers show. Johnny Mac's MVP has been dealt, and it's been dealt to Isaiah Rodgers for the 2 OTAs here on May 31st. The number one football award of May has been dealt, and Isaiah Rodgers gets it. What have you seen from him? What have you seen from the other young guys? And how do you think the cornerback position is going to fall? I got to say, this has become the one thing I'm most focused on because I think there's some really tough decisions here for Howie if these guys are all playing so good. What are they going to do, and how did it look yesterday?
Well, my biggest concern with Isaiah Rodgers, as I said, his time in Indianapolis, he proved he can play, proved he was an NFL player. But anytime you're off for over a year, you worry about rust, and he hasn't been rusty at all. Again, we have to see when he gets the pads on how physical he could be. He's going to be an outside. He's undersized as an outside corner. So we talked about that. I mean, he's 5'10", 170 is what he's listed at. And he proved he could play outside at a pretty solid level with limited snaps with the Colts. And maybe he would have gotten exposed a little bit. Trying to see what the Eagles list him as if they give him a little bit of heft. They got him at 5'10", 176. So that's not – it doesn't project great in run support. So I think that's going to be a key part of Isaiah Rodgers to see how he handles things when the pads come on and things get a little bit more physical. He can obviously run. We talked about some of the speed with Paris Campbell and John Ross, especially. He ran a sub 4.3 at his pro day. So he's a very fast guy. So, he has the athleticism. And right now he's proven that he's in the conversation to be the default setting at corner, outside corner, if Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean aren't ready week 1 and they need more of a ramp up period. To me, he'd be the guy opposite Darius Slay because I do not believe James Bradbury is going to be here, to say the least. So I think he would be that next guy. And that's a good safety net. That's a good safety net to have a veteran guy who's proven at the bare minimum that he can handle the position at the NFL level.
Yeah, so good stuff there from Isaiah. Good stuff there from the rest of the cornerbacks. We'll see how it all shakes out. There's a lot of decisions to be made for Howie Roseman there. So we'll see what he ends up doing and how he plays his cards on that. John, I want to talk about Zach Bond a little bit more, the linebacker. He's apparently had some pretty good showings in OTAs. A lot of talk from Vic Fangio about him. Do you think he can be a guy that can legitimately be a starting linebacker on this team?
Yeah, more and more, I think. Vic said, I think he can play off-ball linebacker, and he's seen nothing to dissuade him from that thought. And I would agree with that very early. He's mainly played on the edge when he got an opportunity to play on defense with the Saints, which is a very good defense. And he didn't play a lot on defense, but they have good linebackers. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The Eagles targeted him early in free agency because he thought he was potentially one of those guys who was blocked by a deep position in New Orleans, and maybe there was more to him. But the disconnect was interesting because Howie talked about him like he would be a flat defender, an edge guy. And then Vic showed up and said, no, he's going to be an off-ball linebacker. Now, is that because he doesn't have other options, or is that because he really likes him? I think that's the question on Zach Bond. I'm not going to get over. They played very well. Devin White's played very well. And people know I haven't been high on that signing. And I hope you see my objectivity here because he's played very well. But I'm still not going to sit here and say that that's going to be a strength of the Eagles defense. I can't see that at this stage.
Yeah, so we'll see what they end up doing there. John, before I want to talk to you about the press conferences a little bit more and just get some of the takeaways on that. But I saw some tidbits from Brandon Lee Gowton on Bleeding Green Nation about Jalix Hunt, Johnny looked comfortable in coverage, Johnny Wilson, Tyrion Davis Price fumbled last week and dropped a pass yesterday, so not good. Just any other things that stood out to you in the practice, maybe that we missed and didn't hit on yet? I mentioned.
Well, I would say, BLG's right. Ty Davis Price did not have a good practice. Really difficult time catching the football, and that's not his purview. I've said pretty consistently, especially when you have Saquon Barkley, Kenny Gainwell, Will Shipley. Those are your three guys that are going to make the team. I would like to have a more of a north-south runner. I talk about it consistently.
Right.
And that's what Ty Davis Price is supposed to be. That's what Kendall Milton's supposed to be. That's what Lou Nichols is supposed to be. So if they keep a fourth running back, and they will, whether it's on maybe not on the 53, but they will on the practice squad. So those guys are fighting for that role, and you got to be able to catch it a little bit. So I thought he took a big step back. Milton caught it a little bit better. And I will say Will Shipley had a really difficult first practice, and he was much better in the second practice. But Will's going to make the team. I mean, he just had a bad day in the first OTA. He was much better in the second OTA, catching the football. But not a lot of great splash plays. I'm trying to think of the splash plays on offense, and it's difficult, and it's mainly back shoulder stuff. As I said, EJ had the EJ Jenkins. Most people think of EJ Smith from the Inquirer.
Yeah, that's what I thought of at
Jenkins, EJ Jenkins has done a good job, and he made some plays. Alberto made some plays. Not much from the receivers. Boy, not much at all from the receivers, which is not a good sign when you're not getting the football outside to the receivers in a passing camp.
Yeah.
But again, I think that had more to do with the quarterbacks. John Ross was open at one point. Dallas was open. More of it outside corner route in the end zone. Jalen just missed him. So not a lot of good to talk about for the offense.
Yeah, which isn't ideal to be honest. We're about 15 minutes away from Chris Franklin joining us. He was also down at OTH yesterday. So we'll get his takeaways, his reaction, what he thinks of some of the stuff. But Johnny Mac and I are going to take a break now. We'll come back. We'll talk a little bit of the press conferences, any more final takeaways, and then we'll also look ahead real quick and just give you the rundown on what the schedule is next week. Next week, things get fun, and then we have a little bit of a lull period after that until training camp. But we do have mini camp next week, and that's mandatory. So we'll be able to see some more things, and John will have full access for all 3 days of that next week. So pretty exciting going into the weekend here on a Football Friday. Pretty exciting weekend. With an exciting week of Eagles football coming up. Just 98 days, Johnny Mac. Jalen Carter amount of days away from
we got to start doing the jersey countdown. Well done, Zander.
Yeah, so Jalen Carter days away from the Eagles opener versus the Green Bay Packers in Sao Paulo, Brazil. An interesting opening, one we haven't had ever here in Philly. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah, we got to get the Bryce Hupp day. That's a 0. We got to get the game day.
Yeah, we'll be talking about Bryce Huff Day on that's a Friday game, so we will have a Birds 365 that day.
Yeah.
Mark it on the calendar already, everybody. If you're in the chat, you better be here for Bryce Huff Day, which is September. What is it? The 6th?
6th, yeah.
September 6th. So 98 days away from now will be Bryce Huff Day on Birds 365, and we'll preview the Eagles opening game, which will be a very fun time. It's tough for me to even think about that right now. We're far away from it, but it is coming up. So stay tuned, everybody, on Birds 365. We'll be right back. Chris Franklin coming up next in hour number 2.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood days.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Valle Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Birds 365, a Football Friday edition, and it's a real Football Friday coming off the OTAs. Eagles are back at OTAs today. No availability there, though, so there will be no fun footage. There will be no takeaways from Johnny Mack to get to. But they will wrap up their OTAs today down at NovaCare Complex. So Eagles are at work today, which is pretty good stuff. John, let's get to the press conferences real quick. We'll start
before we go there, I just wanted, and this is for me. I didn't see it. You can't see everything, but
yeah, right.
When the Eagles went to 11 on 11, a couple guys I trust said Jakobi was in with the first team in 11 on 11s, which may have been 2-3 snaps. But that's interesting. And it's people I trust, so I'm sure it did happen. And that's interesting to me because he didn't get any reps in 7 on 7 with the first team, but in 11 on 11, and that's a positive because that means he's still in the mix. I was starting to think maybe he wasn't even in the mix. So I did want to make that correction. So he did get some first team reps in 11 on 11, which is a very good sign. And that's why I bring it up. But I digress. Go ahead with the press conference.
Yeah, well, that's good stuff. Good to note that Jakobi at least did get out there a little bit with the first team in 11 on 11. John only does have one set of eyes. There's only two eyes on his head, and they both
And they're
go the
getting
same
old.
way. Yeah, so you can't look at every side of the field, which I certainly understand. John, just let's get to the press conferences. John Ross said some exciting things. A lot of people are writing why it's so easy to root for him for the Eagles. So maybe he said some cool things. I liked what Nolan Smith had to say. On ball, off ball. I'm going to go out there and play football. I love this city. I love football. I'm like, holy moly. This is like this is BG and Nick Sirianni combined into one. So what were your takeaways from the press conferences? I know it's good to talk to some guys you have never talked to. And in some cases, guys you haven't talked to in a long time. What'd you take away from the press conferences?
Yeah. No, well, Nolan, yeah, we've talked to a lot. He's a juice guy,
Yeah,
as
he's
he
got a great
mentioned.
attitude. Yeah.
And by the way, he's right. He kind of explained, if you wake up in a crappy mood, you go into work and you're gonna have a crappy day. So you might as well be optimistic about it. And he took a lot of hits last season. It's not easy. Brandon talks about it all the time. Everybody thinks he's the most ebullient person in the history of the world. And he's admitted in the past, hey, sometimes you got to manufacture that stuff and bring it, but that's what you do for the team. And hopefully Nolan Smith, because this is it for Brandon Graham, you got to find a new juice guy and he could be it and be the temperature for that team. As a whole, I think you got to see Howie Roseman talked about this being the culture off season. You got to see, new players, Paris Campbell, John Ross, Isaiah Rodgers, and how well-spoken that they are. People are kind of laugh at the culture thing with Isaiah coming off a suspension, but as I mentioned before, he doesn't run from it. He doesn't say blame and point to others. He's like, you better learn from my lot in life and what happened to me for
Yeah.
other players because it can happen to you. And he's taken accountability. So I thought that was impressive. John Ross went through a number of injuries, admitted he was in a dark place at one point in his career, depressed, feeling sorry for himself. And that's a big hit to take. I mean, you're talking, this is a guy who's the 9th overall pick in the draft, I believe he was. And all of a sudden, if he wants to restart his career, he's got to go to rookie tryout camp, a tryout player at rookie camp with the Eagles. And that could be a bruise to the ego for a guy who was once thought to be a big time prospect. And he said, in a lot of ways, he's glad it happened. And that's a guy who the odds are against. Let's be honest. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. The odds are against him being a part of this offense, but I do think if lightning is going to strike and they get a big time third receiver from the group that is here, it almost has to be John Ross. I mean, he's got the physical gifts to do it if he can stay healthy. And as I said, on the interception, he was open. He ran by the defense. And maybe he can bring that to it. I still think they're going to bring in somebody a little bit more proven down the road at some point, but we'll see how that shakes out. But you saw how well spoken John was, and Paris was. And we already knew that about Jordan Davis and Nolan Smith. Kirby Smart, it was funny. Jordan Davis was asked about the old school mentality of
Yeah, I
big.
heard this. This was great. Yeah.
I mean, we know what went on in Miami, and some guys weren't happy with the way Vic does things. And it starts with Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. I mean, they should not be Vic Fangio's demographics, as I said in my column. And he's, Jordan's 24, Jalen's 23, and they both seem to embrace the old school, the hard coaching of Vic Fangio. No bullshit, as Jordan would call it, and um, it's he kind of threw Kirby Smart under the bus and said, "Man, he's the worst of the worst. He
Yeah.
gets no more old school." And then he called himself and he said he didn't mean it that way.
I know what he
He
meant.
meant,
He meant most
yeah,
old school you're gonna get
yeah,
is
yeah,
Kirby
yeah.
Smart, right?
And so sometimes it's just about how you were brought up, and that's sort of what Bick said. It's not the players, it's the people around them. And if you're going to soft toe around the players, well, you're going to probably have soft players. And if you're going to push them, you're going to probably end up with guys who are a little bit tougher from a mental and a physical standpoint.
Yeah, I'm a fan of it, honestly. I think there could be a return to more of that, honestly. I think these young guys who are this athletically gifted and you learn how hard it is to make it in the NFL and to make it at a high level. I think they appreciate it. And guys like Jalen Carter are a perfect example. Now, that's not going to be every guy. I know that. But
Yeah.
I think when you're and Jalen Hurts is another good example. I got paid $250 million. I want to be coached hard. Like, I want you to pull the best out of me. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm overstating it, but I think it's a great thing. I love coaches like that. That's how I grew up. That's how my dad is. That's how he pushes me, to be best. And that's how I was raised. So I have no problem with it. I would hope that more young players gravitate toward it. Or if they don't like it, at least they're accepting of it and they understand the positives of it. Because I think there are a tremendous amount of positives of it.
Yeah. And before we get to Chris, and hopefully he's going to pop on here quickly, I mentioned, my plug for the show this morning about Wabbit season. They did the Elmer Fudd drill.
Are you talking about the drill? Yeah, where they're
The
hopping
drill,
around. Yeah,
hopping around before they look like Elmer Fudd sneaking up on
posted
Bugs
out
Bunny.
the clip of Britton Covey doing it, and I got some pretty funny comments on it. Yeah.
And then Nolan Smith was great talking about the toes. Poor Olivia Reiner, a friend of the show. She had open toe sandals on, and she took some bullets because she didn't have her toes spread. You have to spread the toes like fingers, Zander. And Lane Johnson taught Nolan Smith that. So that was great knowledge.
What do you mean?
Too.
She had open-toed sandals on with no little divider in there?
Well, yeah, she didn't. You have to have your toes spread even when you're sitting. So everyone learn you have to have your toes spread, and it helps you. Lane is big. Lane wears the toe extenders, and he's taught Nolan Smith. You get better balance. You feel better.
Well, that's a big problem. I mean, a lot of people talk about this. My cousin is like a big health guy, and he's always like, "Yeah, wear those modern shoes. Your toe
yeah,
is going to be like this in a couple of years." Yeah,
yeah, your toes get all mangled, and so you got to spread your toes. They should be like fingers. Nolan said that. He got that from Lane Johnson. So a lot of good stuff yesterday.
Even when Lane Johnson's not in attendance, he's given us some contributions to the Eagles OTAs, and this time it has to do with toe spreading. So not what we expected, but it's something we got. We'll take one more commercial break. Coming up next, Chris Franklin will join the show. Excited to talk to Chris. He was down there at OTAs, so
Chris has got his toes spread.
Yeah, John, how is the setup, by the way, real quick? Like, is it pretty open where you could be at this end and another reporter could be at the other end, or is your guys' place to stand pretty close together?
Unfortunately, and this is the problem with the defense is always on the far fields.
Right. So you can't really see them.
We never get near the defense until training camp. I mean, never. And then when the regular season starts, we never get near the defense. So it's a problem. I don't like it. But
are you allowed to bring like a pair of binoculars down there? I think I have a pair in the garage.
Yeah. I have binoculars. I got the whole 9 yards, but that isn't going to help. People want to see video and they want to see, hey, can we see the defense? I'd love to see the defense, believe me. But they're on the far fields, and unless you have the high-powered photography equipment, it's not going to be too great, to say the least.
Yeah, no way.
Tried to zoom in on the corners for a little bit, and you kind of saw on the opposite end of the field. But yeah, training camp, and even training camp, the majority of days you don't get near the defense, but occasionally, because we're allowed up the sides. Now we're not allowed to go up the sides. For any of the people who have seen the NovaCare complex, they set it up. There's 3 practice fields. For training camp, they'll be right in a row vertically. Then when they get into, when fans aren't allowed, it becomes, they put 2 side by side, one on the far end. Yeah. So I'm getting too deep in the weeds, but just know that the defense is not close.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, let's take a commercial timeout. Coming up next, everybody, Chris Franklin, who is also down at the OTA. So we'll talk to Chris, get his takeaways, what stood out to him, and we'll do all that next on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Listen, if we even think you owe us money, you won't know what hit you. We'll put liens on everything you own. Raid your bank accounts, retirement fund, pension. You'll open up your paycheck and cry because we'll already have the money. We'll haul you into federal court and you might even go to jail. Hey, it's our job.
Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. Our experts will fight for you using IRS guidelines to stop any IRS actions like bank levies or wage garnishments. Plus, eliminate penalties and interest and reduce your past tax bill so you pay the IRS less. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a tax doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
I'd have my mom call the number on the screen. You come see me alone. We'll work it out.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Bird 365, a Football Friday edition, and we are officially off the rails talking about toast spreading. James
Toast
Carter.
spreads, man.
Everybody's making
Chris,
fun of
you got the
Toast has
toast
been right
spread
all
right now?
along. Yeah. So Chris Franklin joins us now. Chris, sorry to start you on such a random topic.
What the hell is is that like a cracker or something? Like what's like the toast spreads? Like what is that?
Yeah, Nolan, man. Lane tells him, gotta have those.
Toast.
spreads.
Oh, I thought you said toast spreads. I was like, what's the toast spread?
Toast,
toast.
no.
I was like, what's that? What's going on with that?
Yeah,
No,
that's why you're looking crazy at me.
yeah, that's what that. Yeah, with the yank, that's something I didn't know. Even then, like I know some of those guys.
No,
They
well,
run from
I
that.
know Lane's talked about it in the past. He's always wearing those toe spreaders. So, but yeah, I mean, now I know I got them spread right now, Chris, in the home office. I got to get some better balance. So,
It's important, especially when we're giving this analysis and everything else. We have to be balanced. You have to be ready to
yeah.
go in any direction. So you gotta have Freddie and dexterity ready to go.
Poor Olivia taking random bullets from Nolan Smith.
Yeah. Tough ball to take, yeah.
I was looking down my notes. I'm like, oh, let me type this up. And I was like, wait, where's this going? Oh, okay, good.
Anyway, yeah. I also enjoyed the Elmer Fudd. I call it the Elmer Fudd drill, where they creep up like it's wabbit season, and the receivers then explode out of the. I guess it's about explosion, but they're creeping like they're hunting Bugs Bunny, and then all of a sudden they explode out of their routes. It was an interesting day at the NovaCare complex, Chris.
It really is. Is it the one where they go 1 and
Yes.
2?
That's Elmer Fudd. Watch him. That's Elmer Fudd creeping up on Bugs Bunny.
I was going slow Chaz Michael from where anybody was Blaze of Glory. It's almost like that. Like
That's
trying to skate
good, you can tell I'm older than you. You can tell I'm a little bit older.
Hey.
But you know, because I had a difficult time, and we can only talk about it. I try to put all the context out there, Chris. We can only talk about what we see, though, and it was not a great day for the offense. What is going on? What do you think is going on?
It's a combination of two things. I think one thing was they were trying to work it when it comes to the short passing game. They're working on that a lot, like a lot. They threw some of that one. They're working a lot, and I think it's one of those things where the defense, when you see it after a while, like, okay, I know it's going to kind of happen around this one. The options, you jump it. Second one is you're seeing what you want with the defense, and when you look at the personnel they have now, what they added, you got guys that like to jump routes and be aggressive, and you're seeing a byproduct of that as well too. So I think you got a combination of both things when in terms of that. To me, it's still May. Now, if this is like the second week of training camp and we're seeing stuff like this consistently, then the red flags. I don't think we're anywhere near that. I think it's mostly they were working on slant because some of the balls you saw, you never see Jalen like try to force it. He said in the past that when it comes time to this time of year, you try things that you know you're not going to do and see if it works. So,
I hope that's the reason. And maybe the quarterbacks were pissed off about having the throw underneath because they were not interested in it from my perspective, Chris.
Yeah, it's a lot of checkdowns. Maybe that's a good thing though, especially having a lot of teams blitzed them last year and it affected them. So get it used in their heads.
Chris, Johnny Mack declared his OTA MVP, which I'm now calling the best football award of May. Johnny Mack's giving it to Isaiah Rodgers. What'd you see from Isaiah Rodgers? And do you agree with John's assessment? Or maybe you have a different Chris Franklin MVP of OTAs?
That's a pretty good one, especially the way we were talking about jumping routes and getting used to stuff, the way he jumped that route and slammed to AJ and he took it back. I thought that was a pretty good one. Otherwise, I don't know. I know it was one practice. I like what I saw of John Ross. I like the way the explosiveness.
Yeah, John was open on that Mekhi Gardner interception. Kenny Pickett just threw a duck out there.
It was definitely underthrown. It definitely was underthrown there. But yeah, I look at the way granted second team, but I look at the way that you still see that quickness, and you still see in that veteran know-how of trying to get off the line of scrimmage and try to get open. And with this offense, they need a speed guy. And you hope that he becomes what they thought Quez was going to be, and you just need him to catch. If they throw it to him deep, say like a 30+ yard passes 6 times, you just need him to catch 3. Because once you get him to catch at least half those passes, you're already going to expect speed, but you really have to dedicate an extra safety. You really do have to play a lot of cover too, and that just opens up stuff for Saquon underneath and running that. So I think there's some opportunities there if he's consistent enough, where he can be your third or fourth guy in this offense.
Linebacker's interesting to me because I started to get the feeling that Nakobe was finally back out there for a little bit, which surprised me. I thought they'd be cautious since he wasn't there last week. And he's back on the field, but Devin White's still getting all the first team reps in 7-on-7. Then they have that short 11-on-11 red zone drill, and Nakobe's out there. So that's a positive for Nakobe Dean. I was starting to think that it looks like Vic wants Devin White to be the middle linebacker of this team. Where are you on that situation?
I think it's a slow ramp up going to next week's mini camp, and then from there you give him the rest and go into training camp. Because I don't think they want to really rush. They want to make sure he's completely 100% healthy, completely comfortable up there. I think when it does start, I think it's going to be Dean in the middle, and then I think White, he's there now because of his experience of playing in the middle in the past, and then you go with that. So I don't think it's too concerning as of yet. If it becomes, hey, you know what, we're looking at, say, Devin White as the start a middle linebacker in a Will, I think Kobe's better as a Mike than a Will. I think that's just
I think they think that
too.
That's sort of my concern. And Vic seems to like Zach Vaughn. So for the first time, I'm starting to think maybe Nakobe, because for this entire time, I'm like, well, Nakobe's going to be the middle linebacker, and then it's going to be Devin, or if Zach Vaughn would have to push Devin White at weak side. For the first time, I started thinking, maybe Nakobe's not. Maybe I should use the pencil, not the pen. But you still think he's going to be the guy?
I still think he's going to be the guy. And then we pull him. Like maybe you keep Devin White, say if it's 3rd and long, or an obvious passing situation. Maybe you slide White over as the Mike, and then you bring in another extra safety. Or you bring in in the big nickel, and then you bring in some other cornerbacks as well too in the passing downs. But I think overall, when you look at it, when we're looking to start, I think you see Nakobe there in the middle.
If he's not the guy, I mean, it might be it for him, right? I mean, this is his 3rd year. He's only got a 4-year contract on the rookie deal. If he doesn't play this year, I don't see how they're going to move forward with him, especially with so many people fighting for roster spots. I mean, Chris, I want to go to the cornerback room. All of a sudden, the cornerback room, Howie's got like a big decision to make here. There's Isaiah Rodgers is stepping up. There's all sorts of guys who are really playing good ball. You got the two rookies. You got Slay is back. I mean, Avonte Maddox. Now, I think they're going to move him to safety. I don't know if they'll do it full time, but just what do you think of the cornerback room? I mean, everybody seems to be playing hard there. Should be a good contest all through camp. But what have you seen so far from your 2 OTA sessions?
This is going to be one of the positions where I would not want to be the person deciding the back end of that section, because I think it's a better problem to have than what they had last year, because they have so many cornerbacks in terms of that. So there's a lot of questions. I look at the back end and seeing who you keep. You can't hide anybody. You maybe somebody gets the phantom hamstring injury going into they like and go, you know what? You're not looking so good. I think you're looking puppish right now. Oh, what? Oh, no, you stay there. You got that. So when I look at it, I think Isaiah Rodgers is earned a spot. I know I'm in the minority when I say this, but I still think James Bradbury could be a guy. I still look at him as a guy who can still contribute, especially now that you have Vic here in Philly. I think he can utilize him the right way. I know it's not popular, but I think I've
said that since for months.
Contribute. I just don't think they want him to contribute here anymore.
Yeah. I don't think he's going to be. I don't even know if he's going to be here June 4th, Chris. I think they might. Obviously, if they can get something for him, there's a lot of these goofy people. It's always Indianapolis or Arizona because Steichen's there or Gannon's there. Blah blah blah. But go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think I look at it like you got a guy who's I know he's off on like that is. When you look at his career, he's off on. This is on. A, it's an on year. B,
it's an on year. Yeah,
it doesn't cost you much. C, I think it's gonna be tough to trade him because everybody knows that you got so many people at that position now, and you're either gonna have to offload him. I think it's tough to trade for him. And would you rather get a guy who can still play at an all pro level and you give him up for a 6th round pick or a 5th round pick? I see especially cornerback. I think there's too much value that you got to take a risk there. So. Yeah,
Boy, they have so many, though. They have so many. And not that May 30th means much, but Isaiah has looked very good. Kaylee looked good. Kaylee should have had an interception. Kaylee Ringo. I love Kaylee Ringo, by the way, Chris Franklin. His upside, I'm talking about. And then obviously you have Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. I mean, at some point, when you have that many young corners who can play on the outside, I don't know. I just don't see the fit with James Bradbury. But I'm with you from a philosophical sense. I think he's a perfect cornerback for Big Fangio. Perfect.
And then cover 6, half side cover 2, half side cover 3. You're
Yes.
utilizing the zone. That's, to me, that you use that. But yeah, I can see that. And when you look at the other guy, Eli Ricks, you still see some talent in there as well too. And Cooper's more, to me, I think he's more of a slot guy. I'm using him in the slot. We've seen him in the slot a lot. I'd use him, continue him there. Avonte Maddox, I think it's good that you use him as that hybrid. The way you envision Cooper, I think that's the way you want to do with Avonte now, especially as much as team's motion, and you got to roll Tom sometimes into the slot. So I think that's perfect for him as well too. But yeah, it's not. I think you can really save one of those safety spots, like, and use them in that. So
yeah, you get to
some
keep an
tough
extra corner.
decisions.
I think
Yeah.
that's their whole plan with Avonte. The fact that because CJ wasn't there yesterday, and Avonte was the first team safety. The first OTA was the first team slot. It all depends on health with Avonte Maddox, but I think that's a very good sign that it seems like the Eagles value Avonte Maddox and his versatility. Because I think a lot of people are saying, well, Avante's going to have, he's on the bubble. He might have difficulty. I don't think he'll have any difficulty if he's healthy. And that's a big if. But to me, that's a good sign. Is that a good sign, the way they've been using him for you?
I mean, for years we've been hearing how much the secondary is going to start turning into a positionless type deal, in that terms. And when you have guys that can not only play inside but outside as well too, that's huge. And the fact you got him for 1 year, he knows he's familiar with the system. And this system lends better towards veterans when you really, especially when it comes to that mad tough stuff and get everything there. So why not have him back here and bring him back? That's what. I know you got a lot of young talent, but especially if you want to stay in this race, you got a lot to do what gets you to win, and you need that communication back there in the secondary.
Yeah, that's a tough part of this for me, Chris, is that you have to balance, because I do think you're right, where this is such a communication heavy system that having guys that are veterans, that's what I originally had said to John before, we had broken down James Bradbury. I'm like, look, bring him back. Help them learn, these young guys. This is Vic Fangio. It's a new scheme. It's communication heavy. But I don't know if they have the roster spots to bring back all these old guys. And then you're also going to keep your young guys on the bench for so long. It's a tough decision to make, but I think they're going to lean young guys. I really do.
And so, you make you wonder: do you go light in some of the other areas? Do you go light and say the off-the-ball linebacker? Do you go light and maybe tight end, what you did in the past as well too, to try to free up some of that spot? And who knows? Maybe there's a guy when it's almost near cut down time and they're interested in you at another position. Maybe you do a player for player. I mean, how many times do we see? It's funny when you look at what the Eagles did when they're trying to basically trade with Denver Broncos, acquiring all these young defensive backs. Why not try to do the same thing and try maybe look and get like a veteran offensive lineman in depth or something, what have you, something like that. So I think that's another option that's on the table too.
By the way, and I'm not picking on Zander here, but because somebody said it in the press conference talking about a new scheme on defense. It's not a new freaking scheme. Why do people keep saying? Now, it's a little bit different. It's always a little bit different, but they've been playing this damn scheme for 3 years now, and this will be the 4th year. Obviously, Vic is the originator, and there's always Nick talked about it when he handed off the play calling. It was his offense, right? You heard this a million times, Chris, but it's a little bit different because Shane's different. If you and I are running the same scheme, it's going to be a little bit different.
Well, it is a new scheme for the young guys, though, right? It's a new scheme for Quinyon Mitchell. And
Yeah,
Cooper
but
DeJean.
I think Nolan was the one, or Jordan was the one. Jordan, it was Nolan or Jordan was the one who said new scheme. It's not a new freaking scheme. It's the same scheme you've been in. There's little tweaks because people are different, but the philosophy remains the same. How do you look at that?
It's a lot, to me. It reminds me a lot of the old the West Coast offense was the big thing, and everybody's like, "Wow, look at the West." And then you had the Andy Reid version, you had the
Yeah,
Mike Holmgren version, stuff like
yeah.
that. It's just the defensive version of that. Maybe it's new in terms of maybe you see a couple new stunts that we haven't seen, and we know Vic doesn't like to blitz a lot, so maybe it's trying to map out some of
I'm
that.
sure some of the terminology is different. He obviously uses those hook or flat defenders a lot more.
Scares me a little bit.
It scares
Honestly, that scares me
everybody.
a lot.
Yeah, it scares everybody. So there's gonna be differences, but the foundation of the defense remains the same, and it's been that way since Jonathan Gannon got here. And it's big scheme. They were copying big scheme. I don't know. It's a pet peeve.
It's just basically, and I know this is a way oversimplification. It's just a 3-4 defense that a 3-4. You know, it's like the overhang, what have you. It's like the old school, like Dom Capers 3-4 defense. You just play a lot of zone behind and make sure you don't get beat deep.
Yeah.
That's
Well, even that, I hate that too. No offense.
I was gonna say, John, you better not let Chris off the hook
No.
here.
Well, it
I just
technically
Dwayne Wade just walking this way like LeBron, John Duncan. Just like, there you go.
50, yeah. They use 50 and 40 fronts, but I always say, tell me who the 4 linebackers are on the field, because everything's nickel in the NFL. You know, so the base philosophy, the old school, the base of any NFL team is a nickel defense. So the old school thought of base defense, 3-4-4-3. You might use that, even if you want to use it as a labeling system. What, 20% of the time? Yeah, it's really 5-2 on 1st and 10, because you have Jordan as the nose tackle. It'll be Jalen and Milton Williams as the 4 eyes, and the overhang players, which will be Sweat and Huff. It's really a 5-2. And then when they get the obvious passing, that they use a 4-man front. But anyway, it's all labeling. I don't know why it bothers me, but it bothers me. So
Here's a question though, because I know you said about the schemes, and I do understand what you mean by that. Do different coaches use different terminology within the scheme?
Oh, yeah.
So Vic Fangio, they're technically learning new terms. It means
terminology can change, and
I just wonder why that's maybe why one of the.
But I would think, and I would think, and I don't know this for a fact, I would think the terminology is very similar to last year, because Sean was a direct disciple of Vic Fangio. So I would think the terminology is very, very similar.
And then also, even when it comes to some of the stuff that they're doing up front, when you look at some of these guys have been doing it since they're back in Georgia, a lot of the same stuff they're being asked to do. When you look at the fronts and everything, and may have seen the playbook a couple times in Georgia, but yeah, you look at the things like, well, that looks very familiar to this. This looks familiar to this, just like that. So it's basically, it's all learning, like whatever they call it. Say if they called it alpha on this one thing, maybe they call it sigma on this other thing. It's one of those things, something like that.
Yeah. Now, terminology on offense, that might be the problem. I think these guys are struggling to learn this new offense, because the quarterbacks all look terrible yesterday. I'm going to be honest. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. Every single one of them. I'm not picking on Jalen Hurts. Kenny Pickett looked awful. Tanner McKee. I don't know what happened to Tanner McKee. That's the worst Tanner McKee has ever looked, Chris Franklin.
There's one thing that I think that can help him out when he stops doing it. There's an obvious pat when he does the ball, and it's loud too. Because quarterbacks naturally just go pat and they go. Yeah. It's a natural. You see him drop back, you go poof. And if I'm a defensive back, I'm not too far away. I hear that hit go. I go, all right, turn around, look at the ball, and get the receiver. And that's something I think he needs to work out of his game and be all right. Like I really just
I want to throw this. Chris is a former quarterback, so I want to throw this at you, because I do you think Doug Nussmeyer's trying to do something with Tanner's mechanics? Because they look bad. I've never seen them look bad, and now they look bad. They didn't look bad last week, and now they look bad. Do you think he's trying to break them down and build them up?
I think that could be. I was looking at some of the stuff. I thought like when you look at just like the shortness when he gives his footwork a little bit. I think that's a little bit just to get him a little bit quicker to do that. There's little nuances. I think it's one of those things where you're starting to think and they go, and a lot of things it's a different reads from what they've been used to when it came to the previous system that they use a lot. So a lot of things I think it's just the quarterback's thinking in their heads like, okay, I got to look at this, I got to look at this and this, and what's this called, and it's not to the point where remember that Chris Sims video where they're just trying to John Gruden gave him a play and he's trying to decipher and going on. It's not nowhere near like that. But I think it's one of those things where they're thinking like, okay, on this play I have to do this and do that, and that's why I think when you're starting to think a little bit more and you start trying to move around and do things, you can go through the progressions and what you're hearing, you're a second slower. And it's just a matter of these guys getting used to it all. Once they get used to all this stuff, then you'll see it be more natural. Then you see it more relaxed. That first week, I think it's more like the same thing we saw what happened with the defense. They were listening to their assignments. They were trying to get used to that. The offense was working on base stuff. They knew this regular stuff and saw what the offense did well. Now I think it's just reversed now for this week going up as well too. It also could have just been that day and what we saw, then as opposed to what's going on OTAs too. So there's a lot that go, but it's a matter of just everybody just getting comfortable with the new calls and a lot of these two new coordinators and what they're.
Yeah, I definitely saw a lot of uncertainty. Guys,
is that the explanation for why they're holding on to the football? John said it's 7-on-7. You should be getting rid of the football quick, and they don't seem to be doing that.
And that's why I think you see the upset. They just like, okay, let me force it and see what it looks like here. And that's what I think you force it into something like that because you don't want to. The last thing you want to do is like quote unquote sack or it's already well, it was a sack. No, that wasn't a sack. And or you're running around trying to pick up yards runners like a 707 DN would have killed you. All right, cool.
Putting all that context, May 30th, no pads, no press coverage. Devontae Smith isn't there. All the stuff we know about OTAs. If you're an offense, should you ever have 4 interceptions in 7-on-7s, essentially? Ever?
If you're limiting yourself to the type of play calls you're doing, no. You still shouldn't have 4 no matter what. But when you're limiting yourself to like 5 yards and then and guys start seeing the same concepts and they know the script for the most part, I think I might. And they go, well, I can cheat a little bit here and try to get a pick here. That's going to play in the factor. So,
all right.
Yeah, ball control.
Good. I need some positivity. Good.
But ball control is important no matter what. You can't give it away. And some of those passes were underthrown by all 3 quarterbacks. There are times when they're trying to go. Some of those balls were underthrown, and that's that part when it comes to ball placement. And a lot of times when and I'm saying it's like quarterbacks like they're like this, but sometimes the route's not precise as well too. That's another aspect of that. Maybe a guy was supposed to cut at 14 and they took under 16 instead, and
there's a lot that can happen. Because Caley should have had 5. He dropped one. He should have picked off that pass, which looked underthrown to us, but maybe it's a bad route. You're right. Maybe Paris Campbell's not where he's supposed to be. Well, yeah, it wasn't pretty.
I mean, Joseph Nada is not a perfect route runner.
He's better than last year. I'll say this compared to some of the, if you're looking at, let's say, like the second tier guys, like, and I'm talking about like him, Austin, like look at second tier guys. He's been the one. He's been. I think he's.
See, I think Jacob Harris was the best on day 1. Now he was hurt. He didn't practice yesterday, so that's a concern. He's a fast guy, so he's probably got some kind of soft tissue injury. But they don't have to give us injury notes at this time of year. And yesterday, I thought John Ross was the best of the tier 2 receivers. So I thought it was Harris, practice 1. I thought it was John Ross yesterday.
See, I put my tiers like a guys like I can see like dressing on game day, and then guys who were maybe practice squad or other one. So I didn't think he was up there with, say, he's on the 53. So that's the way I put my tier. Like, all right, cool. Nah, you're like Ross. I can see as a tier, like in that thing. I can see Ross as a 53. I can see him in that. And that's on me. I should rephrase it better. I rephrase it and saying if it's a guy who I see who is a guy who's probably a practice squad level-ish guy who impressed me, that's where I think Nada fills in for that. If you need to elevate him for a game, all right, cool, yeah. But I don't think I'm saying, you know what, he's going to take Britton Covey's spot, or hey, he's going to take Ross's or Campbell's spots like that. But he's been,
Yeah,
I see a
I
lot of
should
improvement year over year.
mention.
Yeah,
I should mention Britton Covey because Britton, he's the one. He's like he gets separation, and a slot receiver. I think at some point they got to take a look at him.
That's one guy I've been waiting to ask you, John. Are they not even considering him in that wide receiver room? I mean, we're hearing all these names. I'm not hearing anything about Britton Covey.
They don't seem to be giving him any thoughts of first team reps. He gets such separation. Now, Cooper DeJean got a PBU on him, which I'm almost surprised by. And it was a nice play by Cooper. And then he's playing against second and third team guys, but he just has a natural ability to generate separation. Is it just he's too small and they're not going to pay lip service to it?
See, it's one of those things where if as much as we saw them using the bubble screens and stuff last year, I think especially for a guy who's got a history of being a punt returner and working in small areas and finding creases, I thought that would have been the guy you used. That. I mean, what do you have, like 4 catches for 42 or something like that last year?
Yeah.
Like that for it. And I think they used one of them with that too. And a couple of those catches he had were for 2 of those 4 catches were for first down. So I thought that was like kind of telling like he can work things, but if they're looking for guys who are going to demand a big target share and that can make some things happen, why not use him as your 5th receiver? You don't see 5-out receiver formations a lot. We didn't see it in the last couple of years a lot. Why not use him on there and maybe use him in the backfield, get him in motion, get him running, and say, hey, listen, treat it like a punt return. Throw it out there out wide and let him go that way too. But yeah, I don't see him getting 50, 60 targets a year. But what we saw in Nye Smith, with the same thing we project for Nye Smith, you can do for Britton Covey.
Yeah. What about E.J. Jenkins? Not E.J. Smith, E.J. Jenkins.
Also funny Covey story there, but I'll keep it quiet on that one. But I think when you look at the way that I like that he left up a hit, and for me, a good receiver, I like the things I look for as well too. If you can go up there in a tight spot and make a good hands catch, not let it jump up and let him catch the ball. You see so many guys do now. He's got some good hands. I thought he did a decent job on there. He's another guy who's a good depth guy, is a good camp guy. I think maybe he makes the slot. He gets one of those like 2 or 3 in the practice squad, but it's tough. It's tough to like in between cornerback and wide receiver. Those are 2 positions that are really tough depth wise. That you're going to lose. You're going to lose somebody. Yeah, I think if you see a couple of these corners that you see on this roster now.
Corner, yeah. I don't know what it is about this team, but they seem to default to Alberto and Grant Calcaterra, and they've done nothing. E.J. Jenkins, again, it's May. We'll see if he can block at all. But he's made some plays, and he had the good seam route from Kenny Pickett deep in the first practice. He had a back shoulder. Whereas you mentioned he was good hands catcher. I think Grant and Albert should be on the bubble. I mean, I don't know why everybody defaults to those guys.
Well, I think one of them two will be, and it's tough. And it's tough to see which one you do. Like, and then you got Justified. I think you got Uzuma. I think you just need a true blocking tight end on this team.
That's CJ.
Well, who do you guys have then as the leader in the clubhouse for tight end 3 then? If you have Goddard and then
I have Alberto because how he traded for him.
That's the huge asset to get him. that's what I think is you sent away an asset to get it, and even though you still use Grant to get it too, but I think it's Albert, and the fact they kept him around on the roster so long last year. You kept 4 tight ends on the roster. It's like, okay, that was a surprise. I first saw that one too. So I think,
it was a surprise. How surprised were you that they signed him so quickly? It didn't even get. Like, I assumed, all right, Albert's gone. It didn't work out. And then they sign him and then bring him back. I think that indicates a lot that they want him. Yeah.
Yeah. Then Grant, you got to worry about his availability. He's been injured a lot in his short tenure here. So that's another thing you got to worry about as well, too.
Yeah.
Make sure everybody follows Chris Franklin on Twitter at @CFranklinNews or on X, whatever you call it nowadays, and read all his work at NJ.com. He does great work. Chris, anything we missed that stood out to you in your 2 days at OTAs? I know it's spring football, but It's the only thing we've gotten, and we do learn a lot. I said to John yesterday, I think fans and me, we take you guys for granted sometimes. We wouldn't know anything about this team right now if you guys weren't down there. So we did get a lot of information the last 2 times. Anything we missed that you took away from the 2 OTAs?
I think when you look at the Tyler Steen and the way that when you look at his fundamentals and the way that he's put his footwork and his playing that right guard, I think he's improved in that area as well too. I think it's an improvement there. And I look at the Jordan Davis, how we always saw how quick he was when he ran down Josh Allen and in that game last year.
That was amazing.
I still can't believe I'm like
people on that Buffalo sideline still.
The Buffalo sideline was there. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, we had a guy on our afternoon show, Dan Cilia, who works in Buffalo, and he was like, months later, he was raving about that play because Dan asked him about Jordan Davis. He's like, I think that guy's going to be okay.
Zander knows, Chris. I'm amazed people question Jordan Davis. That dude is a good player. I don't know what they expected when he got here because he's a nose tackle and they expected like 10 sacks from a nose tackle, but he is a good player. You know, he needs to play more and he's gotten in better condition. He's 350, but a different 350 he mentioned. He cut out the juice. He's going to Whole Foods and getting the mango.
Yeah.
He gave the plug to Whole Foods. Yeah. Breakfast Club, a lot of good stuff yesterday. Yeah, going back to the toe spreaders and I got to cut out
toe spreaders. Okay, got it.
Toe spreaders. Yeah, a lot of good stuff. Nolan Smith too. Boy, he's an energy guy. If he can play, he's Brandon Graham's replacement as the energy guy.
And that's the big if. I want to see consistency out of them. Like I want to see him remain on the field, and I want to see them use that quickness and get around the corner and do that. And if he finishes with 4 or 5 sacks this year, I think that's out of what he can give. That's markedly better.
And he's up to 245, but I do think Nolan should tell the truth about that damn shoulder. I mean, that was a problem for him last year. I mean, we all knew it. Yeah. He's got the damn harness on all year. He admitted. What was that quote? That great quote. It's my baby. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. I don't know what that means, but that's what he said.
Not a good quote for Nolan to say. He must have been briefed about that one afterward.
Yeah. That's one of those things like all right. And that's tough, especially once you try to lean into those offensive linemen and you're trying to fight off them. You don't get your shoulder. Yeah, It was there. You can tell that too. I think it's one of those things where you say, "Hey, don't harp on your injuries. Don't think about the injuries, and you move forward from there." Or you think more, you hurt, and you slow yourself down. But yeah, it was there. It was definitely there. You're seeing it. That issues with that.
Yeah.
Good stuff, Chris Franklin. Thanks for joining the show, man. We'll talk to you soon. Great takeaways from OTAs. Great work at NJ.com. Make sure everybody follows him on Twitter. He does great work there as well. Chris, thanks for joining the show, man. We appreciate it.
All right, thanks, guys. Have a good weekend now.
Thanks, bud.
Good weekend coming up here for Eagles. And next weekend, Johnny Mac, we mentioned it. They're back out there, man. Mini camp, 4th to the 6th. So what is that, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday next week?
Good question. I haven't looked at the calendar.
Pull my calendar. I'll do it for you.
First mini camp of the Nick Sirianni era. Don't be surprised if that last day is canceled. A lot of NFL teams do that nowadays. They go have the bonding experience, get out of school.
You're kidding me. You're telling me what we get the first mini camp of Sirianni.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's 100%, especially because they have new coordinators and they need to get things down. But a lot of teams cancel that last day. It's sort of become a thing, and they'll go out and have some kind of bonding experience. So don't be surprised. I just throw it out there.
Based on what you just said, now I'm feeling like they're going to cancel that third day.
Yeah, it's
Eagles love that stuff. Oh, everybody's doing it. Oh, everybody wants to cancel the day 3.
Well, they would do it before when they had mini camps. So Doug would do it. They would cancel the last day.
All right, well, hopefully we'll get at least 2 days next week. So good things. Johnny Mac, any final takeaways, any final things you want to say about your trip down to NovaCare for OTAs this week?
I think we hit it all. I'm trying to think. I'm glad, and I give credit to our buddy Jeff Kerr and Tim McManus, my buddy as well. They saw Nakobe in there with the short 11-on-11 session, and that's where Jalen had an opportunity to throw the touchdown pass to Dallas Goedert. So maybe 3 plays he was in there, which is a good thing for Nakobe, and I missed that. So hat tip to those guys, and you can trust those guys. Yeah, but good session overall. A lot of good stuff. Toe spreaders, number 1. Not toast, toe.
Toe spreaders, number 1. And offense, time to step up, I would say, is number 2. Not an impressive performance at OTAs. Fans will make of that what they will. I don't think we overreacted. I think we were appropriate in our analysis, but time to be better. You don't want 4 or 5 interceptions in 7-on-7s. And they
as Chris also pointed out, you're working on some stuff, and they were, and that's a good because they were definitely throwing a lot of underneath stuff. So maybe that was the plan. Maybe that was what they were trying to work on. And it was ugly, but sometimes it's ugly, like a spring training pitcher, like I said.
Yep, exactly. So it makes sense. Let's get out of here. Johnny Mac, good week of shows this week. A shortened week, went by quick with no Monday for Memorial Day, remembering all of our soldiers who passed. But a good week nonetheless, and we appreciate everybody in the chat for being here. If you guys are in here, make sure you like the show on your way out. Still about 300 of you in there watching on YouTube and 500 across JAKIB platforms. So we appreciate all of you. Johnny Mac, we appreciate you. We appreciate the OTA coverage. Great work by you as always, and we'll catch you on Monday. Thank you for this week of shows, my friend.
Thank you, Zander, and thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you, everybody. We will catch you on Monday for Monday's edition of Birds 365. See you guys then.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.